different phrases coming from different places. Let's gather round as one, reach for each other's hands, lifting each other up. One world, one tribe, that's how we thrive. One heart, sharing thoughts and mind. One life to live, to share and to give, celebrating each other in confidence and power. Tribong kapapaihan, let's celebrate. Iwagayway ang pagiging magiting. We rise above, 'cause we are moved by love, inspired and empowered. Let's begin. Tribe of women, let's celebrate. Iwagayway ang pagiging magiting. We rise above, 'cause we are moved by love, inspired and empowered. Let's begin. We Are Inspired and Empowered webinar series is a project of Soroptimist International of Caloocan City.
One truly awesome lady is someone who cares about the environment very much. She's head of Climate and Energy Program of Worldwide Fund for Nature, or WWF Philippines. She's also the first female national director of Earth Hour Pilipinas and longest in the said position to date. She was the first climate change attaché of the British Embassy in Manila, worked at the Manila Observatory, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and has been a member of the Philippine delegation to international climate negotiations. A lawyer with over 20 years of experience in the fields of climate change, energy, and the environment. Ever curious, ever evolving, ever the champion of the environment. Let's all welcome this afternoon Mother Earth's Filipina champion, Attorney Angela Consuelo Ibay. Good afternoon, Attorney Gia or Attorney Angela Consuelo Ibay. Hello, hello. Thank you for
Hello.
saying yes.
Makaligtasang hapon sa inyo.
Yeah, thank you for saying yes to this interview. We're very happy to have you with us this afternoon. Excited na ako kasi very interesting yung mga topics na di-discuss natin. So I would like to proceed to our first question. You've been a lawyer for 20 years. And yung fields na pinasukan mo actually are hindi siya yung usual, no? In fact, siguro nung panahon natin na nag-graduate tayo after college and even after law school, this was something that was not usual. So what made you decide to pursue a law career focused on tatlo, no? Climate change, energy, and the environment?
Yes, so thank you, Lou, and thank you also for inviting me to be interviewed. Actually, when I started in the environment field, that was the first thing. And I guess it's more of because I've really liked, being in nature. And when I was in law school, or no, before entering law school, I distinctly remember answering a questionnaire as part of the application process of entering law school. So I'd already passed the exam, but there was like an interview, and part of the interview had like a questionnaire. And I remember distinctly that they asked, what field of law would you want to go into? And I knew that I didn't want to go into the corporate, which is the usual field that people wanted, no, at that time. And I said, environment was something that I was reading about at the time. And I said, maybe this is something I would want to look into. So that was before entering law school. And then after law school, I was just fortunate enough that one of my professors was in law school. He was appointed as a undersecretary for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and he was recruiting young lawyers at the time. So I said, hey, this is an opportunity that maybe I should look into. So yeah, so I sent my application. He accepted. They accepted, and I guess what they say is the rest is history. So I started an environment, and I really liked it. Especially the topics that I was learning at the time. I was assigned to do a lot of work on when it calls about environment. You have pollution, both water, air, hazardous waste. You have work on environmental impact assessments, then work on mining. Climate change was still up and coming at the time. This is back in 1997. Coming from a economics background, it's not really, a lot of these are very scientific. But I learned on the job and it was quite interesting. So I think that's how I started. And then I decided to stick. So my first work was in environment, in the Department of Environment. And as I said, I was there for 6 years with five secretaries. Kasi naabutan ako ng mga changes in political administration. But I like now, I learned a lot and I really liked it. And I decided to stick to these fields because I knew the importance of having to do changes, or at least to maintain how our environment is at the time and now, and especially now, to ensure na we're improving and also protecting most of what our natural resources are. So yeah, so I started environment. Then I think the other side to that, which is energy, because it's a big component of what's affecting our environment and our climate now.
Okay.
Yes.
Currently, you're with WWF, and
Yes.
I want to talk about Earth Hour Pilipinas. Considering that you've been national director for Earth Hour Pilipinas for 10 years, no?
Yes.
The first and longest female national director. Ano yung sikreto? What is your secret, no? Your staying power? Kasi 10 years na and it's no easy task, no? I've been to countless Earth Hour events. Sobrang big production number siya. Ano yung sikreto mo for staying long?
I guess it's the continuing one is, of course, love for the work itself. That I know that through Earth Hour we're able to galvanize a lot of people, bring them together. We've always said that Earth Hour is the grassroots movement, and it's really for the people, by the people. A lot of local governments and a lot of corporations who really support us as well. And so the 10 years have really gone by so fast, actually, when I come to think about it. And it's part and parcel also of the work that I do on climate change, because using Earth Art as a platform to touch people, to use it as a way by which they can voice out what how the earth is important to them, I think is very important. And it also helps me in a lot in my other work on pushing for policy action on the ground. And Earth Hour has really grown since the time I started. In
Right,
2011 was actually the
right.
first Earth Hour that I was national director. And we started off really with some local governments. It came to the point that we were Earth Our Philippines became the what was named as Earth Our Hero Country because of the participation of the
Okay.
city and
Mhm.
LGUs and many others. So actually, it's not just me; it's really the work that are on the ground of
Mhm.
all these different stakeholders, and I'm just glad to be part of it, to be able to witness how Earth Hour has grown in the country.
You've mentioned about Earth Hour growing, no, through the years. Ano yung mga changes that you've noticed in terms of how people have come to accept caring for the environment?
Yeah, when we started Earth R, really the theme there was shining a light on climate action. And I think even at that time, not so many people, although at the time I was already working on climate change, siguro may at least 10 years na. Climate change was still not a buzzword, so to speak. It was starting
Yeah,
pa lang.
yeah. Correct, correct,
Yeah.
correct.
So and I think that's one of the things that has changed throughout the years. Now people have now recognized what what climate change is all about, how it affects them. They might not be able to explain it in a very scientific way, but when you talk to people, they know na nararamdaman nila yung ganito yung pagbabago ng klima. When you talk to farmers, to fisher folk, or even those in the business sector, what they understand about climate change and how they're acting on it. They have bits and pieces of it, and I think that's one of the things that we've seen. And I hope Earth R has been able to sort of shine a light on that and get them to realize that they themselves can play a part and have a part and a role to play in addressing climate change. And I think through the years, people have started to understand. Lalo na this time during the pandemic, no, because of the link between what has happened, paano nangyari itong pandemic, the link of how we're
Yeah.
affecting nature. I think that
Mhm.
one is critical. Kasi yung health ng nature natin also affects us on our health. And that's what we've been trying to also tell people in years
Mhm.
before the pandemic. And I think now people are starting to, see that connection. And many people come up to us when especially when we had the mga switch off events.
Yeah, I
They
remember the switch off events. Yes.
the mga switch off events, I think many also like it because it's a way to
Mhm.
bring people together, for people to see na yung ginagawa pala ng iba, meron tayong pwedeng gawin na maganda.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted to use Earth R for. Of course, we've had criticisms before about, sinasabi nyo, patay kayo ng ilaw ng isang oras. Paano yung mga, alam mo, may mga criticisms. And
Oo.
can
Yeah, yeah.
naman constructively. Of course, you
Or,
cannot
or
everyone.
maybe may mga naririnig ako yung sinasabi na, magpapatay ka ng ilaw ng isang oras, may impact ba talaga yan? Isang oras lang naman. May mga ganyan.
Yes, and that's one of the changes that happened to Earth Hour, because the
Mhm.
first few years it was really the hour itself that we emphasized, the 60 minutes.
Okay.
But if you've
Okay.
noticed in around 2012, 2013,
Mhm.
we've had added the plus, because we said that okay, now that we've had Earth Hour, people know that there is an hour, but we also wanted people to understand that their actions for 1 hour can transcend beyond that hour. And kaya may plus. Yung going beyond the hour is actually the more important thing. Na, oo. So the 1 hour is really more of like a celebration to come
Mhm.
together, to,
Yeah.
to show that you have a voice, to highlight that we all can be part of a bigger movement for the environment. But really, the plus sign is the critical one, because what we do beyond that 1 hour is what will tell the difference between what will happen to our
Yeah.
environment.
Oo. Parang ang
Oo.
tingin ko
That's a
dyan yung the plus is what happens when the show is over. Kumbaga, it's the constant, consistent, day-to-day thing that happens that makes you truly committed to what you did during the first
yes.
60 minutes. Okay. Um, Attorney
Yes,
Gia,
yes. Very true.
you mentioned kanina about climate change. Sobrang interesting for me yung being part of the international negotiations which you've been a part of, no, through the years. Can you tell us more about ano ba yung nangyayari talaga sa mga climate negotiations, climate change negotiations?
Mentioned my first climate change negotiation happened, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the Philippine delegation because I was working at the DNR at the time. And that particular negotiation was conducted in Kyoto, Japan. And so for the climate change, this is governed by the what we call the UNFCCC, or the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is the governing convention, anything that has to do with climate change negotiations. And the Philippines is a signatory to it, and we've also ratified the convention itself. So through the years, since the convention is one of the three, what they call the Rio conventions. You have the Convention on Climate Change, the Biodiversity Convention on Biodiversity, and then the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. All of these three were signed together during the Rio Convention, during Earth Day in Rio. And so the convention, every year, the parties to the convention, like the parties are the countries. The three conventions are what they call the part of the were signed together in Rio de Janeiro back in
Yeah.
1992. The convention, the climate convention, or UNFCCC, every year has what they call the COP, the Conference of the Parties. They come together towards the end of the year to discuss critical issues that have to be involved in terms of the convention itself. And lastly, and I've been fortunate enough to be not on a year-to-year basis, because sometimes it's very it's also expensive, because year to year it changes, the host of the convention changes, and usually what they target is it goes to different continents, so that all countries, parties are have the opportunity to attend. The last one that I did attend was the Marrakesh Convention in 2016, which was
Mhm.
also after the Paris Convention, which I was able to attend as well in 2015. Um, and what happens is that there are various issues. Now, the difference that I can
Mhm.
say is when we started in 97, I think the issues were a little bit not as complex as it is now.
Mhm.
Um, well, now we have, different countries who have different, of course, opinions of what we all should do as a global community.
Yeah.
In terms of climate change. So what happens in the negotiations is basically you have proposals of what needs to be done as a
Mhm.
global community. So, for example, looking at how do we reduce our emissions? How much do we reduce our emissions? And now the countries are now asked to come up with what they call the nationally determined contribution. What do we contribute as a country to this global problem? And the Philippines just submitted its what they call the NDC, Nationally Determined Contribution, just last week in April 15. So all countries are now asked to do that, and we all have different, circumstances. So what we contribute per country would be different from what another country would
Other
contribute.
countries.
But all of that is looked in together as a whole, so that we can
Mhm.
address the convention's goal, which is to ensure that we stop anthropogenic or man-made emissions from making our climate even warmer than it is
Okay.
already. So that's
Okay.
basically it. And countries would make proposals depending on the agenda of the convention. So they would make, proposals of language or text to a decision that the conference will have. And usually those texts are what they call negotiated. So each country has a proposal, there's a counter proposal, and at the end of the
Okay.
day, there would be hopefully a decision. Sometimes the convention usually lasts for 2 weeks, and negotiation by exhaustion. Kasi
Oh,
parang
'pag
matirang
pagod
matibay kung sino
oo
man
ka na
yung
lang.
minsan babantayan mo yung mga issues which are critical to you. Because syempre, we know that as a global community, there are countries which are more developed. There are
Mhm.
developing countries like the Philippines. So our circumstances and our needs and what we want to happen are very different from,
Yeah.
let's say, the ones who are developed countries. So yan yung tinatawag in the parlance ng climate change yung um, common but differentiated responsibilities. We have common responsibilities across different countries, but there are differentiated responsibilities depending on the, I guess, the state by which a country is. So yan yung isang principle yan under the Climate Change Convention. And I think that's a principle that's now carried in different conventions across the world.
And I suppose, because we're very different at developing countries, very different from, a first world, iba-iba rin siguro yung
Yeah.
executions, no? In terms of
Yes.
how they will solve these problems.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, for climate change, meron yung historical responsibility, because they said that this challenge, this what we call the problem of climate change, was exacerbated by the development of these developed countries, that they had developed because they had the industrial revolution, and therefore they
Right.
had more industrialized processes that actually spewed in more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere without knowing the consequences at the time na this it will lead to climate change. So historically, we're saying that especially for these developed countries, and you've already developed that, but you should put in more. So you have more
Right.
responsibility to reduce. You have, because you also have the resources, diba? Especially the
Correct. Correct.
financial and the technological resources. And for developing countries like the Philippines, we still need to develop, but you should enable us to develop in a more sustainable manner, and maybe help us to, technology transfer, through capacity building, even access to financing, so that we would have very good projects that will actually help the environment.
Somehow, climate change are still like big words to me. Ano yung parang pinaka-simpleng paraan to explain it to someone? Kasi kanina you mentioned about farmers, fisher folk. Ano yung, how do you talk to them? How do you explain uh, to people in a very simple and yung talagang naiintindihan nila and ma-appreciate. 'Di ba? Kasi sometimes the environment kasi is the last thing that anyone will really, kung gutom ka, 'di ba? Kung wala kang trabaho, environment ba yung iniisip mo, 'di ba? For someone na
Yeah.
walang nakakain 3 times a day, environment sometimes the last thing that they will think of. Except maybe for times na talagang affected sila by the bagyo, 'di ba? Kasi doon na nila nakikita na, oh, kaya
Yeah.
nagkaroon ng landslide, kaya naanod yung bahay kasi nga nagka-landslide, and that's because of the,
Oo.
you know, uh, uh, kalbo na yung mga puno natin sa bundok. Pero in simplistic terms, paano nyo pinapaintindi sa mga simpleng tao lang kung ano talaga yung importance ng climate change?
Actually, sa mga farmers, mga fisher folk, mga isda, alam na nila yan kasi nararamdaman nila yung impact. So doon na kami nag-uumpisa. Tinatanong namin, ano ba yung kaibahan ngayon sa panahon dati? Ano ba yung nararamdaman nyo ngayon? At sila mismo magsasabi na kami, for example, farmer ako na dati may season kami kung kailan kami magtatanim. Alam namin na sa ganitong season, dito darating yung panahon na tag-ulan, dito yung panahon na ganito kailangan namin. Pero ngayon napupunan nila, it's either hindi na dumarating yung ulan, or dumarating man sobrang dami, or walang-wala talaga. Tapos doon kami nag-uumpisa na kung ano yung experience nila, sasabihin namin na alam nyo ba, dahil yan ay nangyayari dahil nga nagbabago na yung klima. Paano nagbabago yung klima? So, explain na namin dyan na, umiinit yung mundo, napupunan nyo ba? At kadalasan sasabihin nila na, oo, napupunan namin na umiinit na nga siya. So, sasabihin namin, paano umiinit? So, yun yung, and then we use examples na, for example, when we explain about climate change, about warming, ginagamit namin yung example ng kumot. Like yung mundo, kinukumutan siya ng tawag na, yung kumot niya is the atmosphere. And kung yung kumot na yan, di ba, pag may kumot ka, pag masyadong makapal, masyadong mainit sa loob, di ba? Ganon yung atmosphere natin. Para siyang kumakapal kasi na-enhance siya ng dumadami yung carbon emissions sa atmosphere. Kaya parang kumakapal yung kumot, kaya umiinit sa loob. So ganun namin as much as we can to find examples for which people can understand it more. And pag nakikita nyo yun, parang mas nare-relate na, oo nga no, kasi pag nagtaklob ka nga naman, pag mainit sa loob, tapos isipin mo na yung kumot na yun, hindi mo matanggal. So ang solusyon lang dyan is babawasan mo, susubukan mong ninipisan mo para hindi masyadong mainit sa loob. Kasi we always also say that climate change is so there is a natural phenomenon. There's what they call a natural greenhouse gas effect. Yan yung part ng greenhouse gas effect. And otherwise, masyadong malamig sa mundo. So pag sinabi namin na kumot yan, minsan magtatanong siya, ba't hindi na tanggalin yung atmosphere? Sasabihin namin, pag tinanggal mo yan, para na tayong ibang planeta. Kasi it's the atmosphere which enables us to have, to make organisms actually thrive. Kasi comfortable enough na magkaroon ng growth and ma-retain yung warmth na yan for everything to be able to thrive. So yun yung mga examples by which we try to get them to understand. Kasi yung iba, masyadong technical na siya. Yung parang, emissions growth, hindi na nila maintindihan. Pag tinanong, ano yung mga napupunan nyo na pagbabago? And that's the thing with climate change, is the unpredictability already. Because enhanced global warming or enhanced greenhouse effect actually contributes to a lot of unpredictability. So yung mga sinasabi nila na stronger typhoons, it's possible. Hindi naman dumadami yung usual average number of typhoons in the Philippines. But for every typhoon that's happening, we're noticing it's either stronger than normal than previously. So yung parang or it might not be stronger in terms of wind factor, pero yung amount of rain that it brings mas madami. So parang one-time big time event ng tubig, di ba? So yung mga things na sinasabi namin na yan yung hindi na pre-predict before. And usually ang impact ng changes in climate is hindi siya year to year, parang they usually look at a trend of 20-30 year data. Eh ngayon parang yung mga changes, and yun yung worrisome na sabi namin. So yun yung mga ways by which we also try to explain.
Actually, Attorney Gia, yun pa nga yung isang hurdle, kasi before, back in the 90s, when you talk about climate change, people are not very interested to talk about it, or weren't very interested to talk about it, kasi ang feeling nila, ang impact naman yan matagal pa eh. Diba? Yung tipong, hindi naman ako, maapektuhan yan, or kahit yung mga anak ko, kasi they're looking at years and years pa. Pero, like what you said, it's because, parang lumiliit na yung pagitan ng mga panahon na nagiging very evident and felt yung impact. And I like what you said about how you talk to, most of the farmers and the fisher folk. Tama na i-relate yung impact sa day-to-day nila. Kasi yun talaga yung mas totoo for them. Talk about the impact first and then the concepts behind it. Kasi minsan pag inumpisahan mo yung theories and concepts, parang ang hirap sumakay, di ba? I mean, kahit yung mga, alam mo yun, kahit yung mga nagbasa na about climate change, minsan nahihirapan pa rin to really understand everything about it, because as you said, ang daming changes. And ngayon, paiksi na ng paiksi, paliit na ng paliit. Meron akong question about itong mga fields na napasukan mo, because they're very interesting and very relevant nowadays. I wonder, ano ba yung pwede mong i-advise sa ating mga kababaihan na gustong sumunod sa mga yapak mo? Kumbaga, well, for one, I don't know if a lot of women know that there is a career. There is a career in energy, in the environment for them. Kumbaga, ano na siya karera na siya. Ano yung pwede mong ibigay na advice for those who want to consider, or kung hindi nila alam, pwede nilang i-consider na career pala ito?
I think there's a lot of opportunity now for those who would be interested to follow in these fields. And if you have, even just curiosity about what's happening in our environment, what's happening in terms of, how do things work? Let's say, electricity. How does it flow? Because electricity is being used always. I think we should really cultivate it and see if this is a field that we can work on. In fact nga, nung nasa Ateneo, back in college, wala pang environmental science division yun.
Oo, I remember wala nga. Yes, yes.
None. And in fact, it was only in later years, I think,
Mm.
2000 or mga late 90s, after we graduated na decided
Yeah.
na to have an environmental science course. And I think those are things na are good developments because mas specific na siya sa environmental science and then environmental management. Kasi dati it will always be either you go into chemistry or you go into physics, ganyan. And then branch out na lang siya, di ba? Or
Yes, yes.
or hardcore engineering, for example, electronics engineering, ganyan. All these will actually lead into a possible career on the environment. But
Okay.
I think ang part niyan is really cultivating that love for nature. Kasi the
Okay.
curiosity to be able to, see how can I preserve our environment or even help protect it. And then using whatever backgrounds that you have to be able to look into that. Kasi ako, ang background ko naman is economics. Then I went into law
Right.
school.
Correct,
So iba
correct.
yung hindi siya environmental science, hindi siya environmental management,
Yes.
but I
Yes.
think it's more of like having that curiosity and having that also that I would say love for what is happening and seeing what can I do to contribute for the betterment of the earth. So, ganun lang naman talaga. And I think for those who would be interested, I think there's a lot of opportunities. In fact, nakakatuwa nga ngayon kasi a lot of schools already have that environmental science courses. Also because there's an environmental education law already. So in fact, the topic on environmental education is now spread out through the tertiary, I think tertiary level and also secondary level. And for us in WWF, we're also trying to push for what we call the education for sustainable development. Kasi ngayon, yung hindi na siya parang siloed thinking because if we talk about education, kailangan all of it, or if you talk about climate change, hindi lang siya sa science pag-uusapan. Kailangan mas holistic. You can talk about climate change in a math problem. You can talk about climate change in art. So when you do that and talk about it not just in school but also how do you involve the community. So that's parang the concept of education for sustainable development kasi tinutuhog
Okay.
mo na lahat ng mga aspects of sustainable development and hindi lang siya sa isang topic lang, sa isang audience lang. So, and I think there's a lot of movement that's happening now for that. And I hope people and students get exposed to it and they also
Yeah.
explore na meron palang mga ganito na pwede kong gawin siya as a career eventually.
Na it exists, no? Kasi akala ko nga parang ang kailangan matalino ka sa science or 'di ba like what you said kanina either in chemistry or physics or engineering, but you don't need to have, you don't need to be in those courses. In fact, you were in economics, 'di ba? And then later on law school. So pwedeng kakaiba. In fact, posible na kahit nasa arts yung background mo, pwede kang mag-pursue ng career, di ba, in the environment. I like what you said about importante na merong natural love for the environment and genuine concern na iniisip mo kung meron ka bang pwedeng gawin para makatulong for the environment. I think those are more important idudugtong ko dun, ano pa ba yung ibang traits na kailangang meron ako to become, a successful person in these fields? Not necessarily a lawyer, kasi sabi mo nga, pwedeng
Mhm.
from different, di ba, backgrounds ka manggaling and still have a career in energy and the environment. Ano pa yung ibang traits you think that, one should possess?
Yeah. I think it's really also one is curiosity.
Mm.
How can you, lalo na ngayon in the age na innovation is very important, critical.
Yeah.
So and you can use innovation to be able to help nga protect the environment. I think I always tell people protecting the environment is not just like environment lang per se, because if you do that, if we protect the environment, at the end of the day, we're also protecting, in a way, selfish, no, protecting ourselves as a human
Mhm.
species.
Mhm.
So it
Mhm.
also redounds to that. So parang kasi we also have to connect it to what's in it for us. Paano ba, ano bang role ko, relationship ko dito sa buong scheme of things in the environment. And I think that is part and parcel of the curiosity that I was mentioning. So one of those traits
Yeah.
yun nga is also I think it's also being consistent. I always like to think
Mhm.
na you always have to study. Yung nga I didn't really naman study, but and be open to what's happening. I learned about climate change on the job, so to speak,
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
it, reading about it, yes, and even energy. I had to understand it on the job, so to speak. So I think it's also really trying to be open and curious enough, and I think that will be able to put people in whatever field you are, and be successful and be consistent in learning. Kasi as we always say, di ba, learning does not stop in school. So even when we're
Yeah.
working, I learned a
Yes.
lot and I learned a lot from other people. Hindi lang yung mga those in high positions, but even those on the ground. Na sometimes sila mismo, they have traditional knowledge that they can share. They have experiences that I've never experienced, but when they explain it, it makes me realize a number of things. So yeah, it's really being open and to continuously learning.
I think Attorney Gia, 'di ba, parang if you really love what you're doing, especially 'di ba, yung curiosity, if you really love it, you'll never have to work a day in your life. And I think especially in your field, it's not really work what you're doing for me kasi parang ang tingin ko diyan it's more of a vocation, 'di ba? Kasi parang ano yan parang teacher, 'di ba? Yung hindi kailangan merong genuine or natural love for teaching and even for the kids. Otherwise, mahirap
Yeah.
kayong magturo. So parang in a way, no, yung in your field, because it's also quite difficult. Not only because it's new, in fact, it's not new anymore. Pero it's not as popular like if you choose the more popular careers or fields. Ang ang gusto ko sa sinabi mo is yung you continue to be curious and the fact that you have to be consistent. Yun yung I think yun yung very important. Meron akong last question, Attorney Gia. Kung meron kang mabibigay na advice, no, dun sa mga uh, young girls, women, or even striving women lawyers na ang pangarap is magkaroon ng maging kagaya mo or magkaroon ng career na kagaya ng sayo, ano yung pwede mong ibigay na kahit isang advice lang, no? You know, to encourage them, to inspire them to keep at it.
Ang hirap pag one advice, but I guess it's
Sige,
it's
pwedeng
just
two words.
having one is I guess as I'm lagi ko sinasabi being curious, pero siguro curiosity as well as being courageous. This field at a certain point, you have to be courageous and compassionate, because I think you also have to have that kind of compassion for the environment and for the people who are affected. And just just these things, if you want to be in this field, it's really that compassion for what's happening to our to nature, and then how it affects the communities, and at the end of the day, when we're helping protect the environment and helping conserve it, we're actually helping also the communities who rely on it, on them. And it's for, I always like to think that it's for future generations. Kasi parang responsibility natin as stewards of nature to ensure na we pass it on to the next generation, di ba? Na maayos.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think having that kind of compassion and understanding is something that has really is one thing that I would like, women out there. And I think women are very the ones who work well also in the environment, I would like to say, based
Oh,
on my experience. They're the
okay.
ones who yeah, and they're the ones who actually are the courageous type, especially on the ground. Dahil nakikita nila kung may nangyayari na hindi maganda sa ating, for example, sa ating mga karagatan, sa ating, they're the ones who also speak up. I mean, and I think
Okay.
there are a lot of women leaders also, yung sa mga communities na environment, and also lawyers, myself na older rin sa akin, na who have been the example, and have been a mentor also. And I'm very, very grateful that I've seen people and been able to work with people like them. And I hope na we can cultivate, kumbaga, the next rung of leaders, or who can, step up. Kasi syempre, at a certain point, we need to also have new blood who are doing work
Yeah.
such as what I'm doing, di ba? And I hope na they would take heart na this is it's a very fulfilling work. I would like to say na knowing na you're contributing to a bigger picture of how the planet is going to be for the next generation, that something I've done now will actually help the next generation be able to thrive, and the environment to thrive along with them.
Kumbaga, Attorney Gia, this is already your legacy. Somehow, no? Kasi
So
the impact of what you're doing doesn't only, di ba, affect what generation in 10 years, 20 years, even far, far beyond. And so, yeah, we do encourage young girls, women, to consider a career in the environment and energy. Um, are you open to doing career talks, Attorney Gia? Kasi 'di ba, that's one way of reaching our youth, no? To for them to get interested, to be interested, to get them to consider a career in the environment.
So yes, I'm open to doing career talks. I've actually done it before for law school. I was invited before to talk about what we do in terms of environment as a lawyer. So yes, I've done it before, and yeah, I'll be willing, because as I said, we need to cultivate the next rung of people and ladies and women who would do this kind of work. We need, the more that we have people who are working for the environment, the more we can be able to protect it and conserve it for future generations.
Ayan, thank you so much, Attorney Gia, our woman champion for the environment. We want to thank you, SICC, Sir Optimus International Caloocan Chapter, actually. Thanks you for this afternoon, for sharing your time, sharing your experience. It was a very, very interesting discussion. Something that, we would like to pursue, kasi madami pang topics about climate change, no, na pwede natin pag-usapan, na talagang interesante. And I hope you also enjoyed your time with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and I've been truly honored to be part of your series. And I hope everyone stays safe as we go along. Salamat.
She holds many firsts in her achievements as a Filipina in her legal field, especially within the Novartis Group. First Filipina within Novartis to be appointed to a senior global leadership role in the group legal department across Novartis and Sandoz. First and only Filipina in the corporate functions legal leadership team of Novartis Group while currently in Basel. First and only Filipina in the corporate affairs and global health leadership team while currently in Basel. First and only Filipina in the Novartis social business leadership team while she was in Sandoz headquarters in Germany. And finally, first and only Filipina in the Sandoz global compliance leadership team in her concurrent role while in the Sandoz headquarters in Germany. Wow, so many firsts. Truly, despite her petite stature, this Filipina, feisty and fearless in all her roles as a wife, mother, and career woman, towers against all the others, continuing to push against challenges and limitations. Friends, let's all welcome Attorney Monina Vierneza. Attorney Monina, can you share with us how your dream of becoming a lawyer really started?
Even when I was a young girl, I have always known that I wanted to become a lawyer someday. When I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and you'd ask me, what would you like to be when you grow up? My answer would just be very simple and straightforward. I want to become a lawyer when I grow up. So I knew it right there and then. And I don't recall that dream changing throughout the years, or me having thoughts of an alternative career, or you know something else that I could be when I grow up. It was just plain and simple. It was simple, straightforward. I wanted to become a lawyer. And I think that somehow started when I was early in my school years, maybe kindergarten or nursery, when I started learning about the people in the community, or the different professions or work of the different people in the community. And it was very clear in my head right there that I was not going to become a doctor or a dentist because I was afraid of blood. And I was not going to be an engineer, or would be in a profession that would require mathematics, because I hated math. But I did love English subjects, language subjects, social sciences. I loved reading, writing, thinking through things, and finding solutions, except solutions for math problems. So I think it was somehow a natural progression for me, or a natural path that led me to where I am now. I also knew where I was going to go to college. I knew I was going to go to Ateneo de Manila University, and I also knew which law school I wanted to go to. It was Ateneo Law School. So the only thing that I had to think through a little bit more was what's a good pre-law course for me. But I knew years before I even graduated from high school that I would take another 8 years in school, which is 4 years of pre-law and another 4 years of law school to achieve my dream. And I was totally, totally fine with that. I was prepared for that. Um, One thing that I recall I was not too keen about growing up was arguing and debating, which at that point in time, maybe at least, in those early years, being a good debater or someone who loves to argue was a stereotype of what a good lawyer should be. But I was not interested in that. I was not too keen on that. Although my parents and my family did tell me many times when I was growing up that I had this ability to reason my way out of trouble. And so maybe that also, shaped the path that I was going to take, to get to where I am now. But yeah, I think that was that's been the dream ever since. And my parents, my family saw how passionate and driven I am to achieve that dream, and they really fully supported me, and that helped get me to where I am right now.
Can you tell us more about the challenges you encountered, no, both as a Filipina and a woman lawyer here in our country and abroad, and what kept you going?
In the Philippines, one of the biggest challenges of being a woman lawyer was the stereotyping that women lawyers are more suited for what many perceive to be softer fields of legal practice. So, this may be corporate law, intellectual property law, mergers and acquisitions, banking law, and that male lawyers were more suited for litigation, labor and employment practice, and similar other fields which many perceive to be as the tougher fields of legal practice. In my case, I was actually interested in three fields, which is a combination of what I earlier loosely described as softer and tougher fields of legal practice. I was really keen. My areas of specialization were on intellectual property law, corporate law, and labor and employment practice. So the first two, I think, was really somehow a default for a female lawyer like myself at the time. But thankfully as well, I mean, I was not just thrown into it simply out of a default, but also because I enjoyed these fields of legal practice, and those were actually my foundation: corporate law, intellectual property law, transactions. Uh, those were my foundation in terms of how I am shaped and molded into the in-house legal counsel that I am right now. But I was really keen as well on labor and employment practice, and this was not a default for sure, and mainly because labor and employment law entailed collective bargaining agreement negotiations, resolutions of labor conflicts, management, and having to deal with strikes, which were prevalent at the time and which could be dangerous in some occasions. And the male lawyers in our law firm were also protective of us, female lawyers, and trying to keep us away from these dangerous aspects of legal practice. But I persisted, and because it's really something that I was passionate about, I really, did my part in convincing the male lawyers and the partners in our law firm that I had the chops, the ability, the courage, the tenacity to actually, immerse myself in these really complex areas of labor and employment practice, dealing with labor unions, dealing with labor conflicts, and really being out there, regardless of it being dangerous or not. So, I mean, it wasn't an easy journey. I mean, baby steps, but I had to prove myself, and I really set out to do that, to prove to them that, you know, um, the areas of legal practice should not be gender based, but it should be based on skills, competence, and also your aspirations and your areas of interest. And I think I was able to achieve that because they started giving me these tasks that were typically given to the male lawyers, and eventually I was able to prove myself, and that was able, that also set the stage for many other female lawyers in the organization, in the law firm, to actually be, interested in those roles and to actually be given those assignments as well. So yeah, with that, being a lawyer in Europe, in Germany and in Switzerland specifically, I would say is less challenging. But I have to also put that into the context of the fact that I am in a multinational corporate setting, where the values of diversity and inclusion is really on top, of the list. And it's really something that the company uh, highly respects, protects, and really makes sure that we have, exert conscious effort to respect diversity and be as inclusive as possible. But still, Filipino lawyers in the global setting is not a common occurrence. In fact, it's very, very rare. And that's an observation that I have had over the last few years. In fact, it's not even a common occurrence for Filipino lawyers in general, not just Filipino lawyers in particular. And this is, I think, mainly because the journey from the Philippines to the global setting is not always the easiest journey. And you'll have to compete with many legal luminaries, legal experts from different parts of the world, sophisticated countries, and they're really knowledgeable people, really talented people. But if there's one thing I could actually share with everybody, is that a Filipina lawyer could actually shine. We have a place, in the global setting, and we could actually do it, and we could actually shine and prove to the world that we can.
Your accomplishments, no, both in Germany and Switzerland, were really talaga ang galing. Did you ever imagine a provincial lass like you would ever conquer Basel, Switzerland?
No, not in my wildest imagination. My ultimate goal when I became a lawyer in the Philippines was to get into a big law firm, get promoted from junior associate to senior associate, and then become a partner. So I was able to do all that, and I was also able to achieve it within the time frames that I set for myself. And honestly, I could still be doing that now, being a partner in the same law firm, and still be happy and fully accomplished. But then, after a couple of years of being a partner, the opportunity to head the legal and compliance department of my first multinational company in the Philippines presented itself. And it was indeed a life changing decision. It started my journey as an in house counsel. So that was from GE to Pfizer and then to Novartis. And in hindsight, looking back, I could have also retired in each of those roles and still be happy and still feel fully accomplished as well. But in the horizon, you also see many opportunities to go further in the region or in the global setting, and it's up to you to grab it courageously and with childlike wonder and excitement with all things new.
Attorney Monina, sharing is caring. Can you share with us, no, ano yung tatlong traits na kailangang i-possess ng isang Filipino lawyer to become successful internationally?
The three key traits that I will share with you are not specific to a lawyer in the Philippines or to a lawyer internationally. This is actually something that could apply to everyone, to each and every one of us, wherever we may be. So, whichever geography we may be and whatever profession we may be in. So, the first key trait is integrity. So, I will not expound on this trait anymore because I think we all know integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is looking. It's never compromising on your principles, be it in your personal or professional life. Integrity will define you. Of course, we've always said that, your failures, your successes, and those many other things around you will not define you as an individual, but integrity will define you. And it will also define how you are perceived externally, perceived by society, and also the actual impact that you could make on society. And that's why it's really very important. The second key trait is humility. Lawyers, Filipino lawyers in particular, have a natural chip on our shoulders, mainly because of how we are regarded in the community or how we are looked up to in the Philippines. Despite the lawyer jokes and all that, the law as a profession is looked up to with high respect, with high regard in the Philippines. But the moment you go in-house, the first thing that you will realize is that you are not the center of the organization. You are not the end all and be all of the organization, which is different from a law firm setup. In a corporate setup, the legal function, as with many other, enabling functions, you're supporting the organization. You're enabling the organization to be able to achieve its goals and objectives. The moment you are able to embrace this supporting role, this enabling role in a humble manner, in a manner where you're willing and open to collaborate with all the other members, all the other teams in your organization, that's actually the time that the rest of the organization will actually see how valuable you are as a function, as a subject matter expert, and they will actually give you the amount of respect that actually would transcend, even the amount of respect that you actually have within a law firm environment. And that's, an experience that I had, and I continue to have, in all of my organizations, all the way up to my current organization now. It's this humility that's able to, bring me to where I am now, because I did not throw my weight around. I did not, impose myself, my legal knowledge, my subject matter expertise. I used it to be able to support the organization in a humble way, in a collaborative way, in an inclusive way. And that is actually very valuable in the organization. The third one is a sense of purpose. Finding and really realizing your sense of purpose is a key trait. So this means you actually go beyond your function. You actually find the meaning and the value of what you are doing. So in my case, I don't just review contracts for the sake of reviewing contracts. I think of what the objective of the contract is. And in most cases, it's bringing, healthcare access to underserved populations in the world. It means bringing medicines at the right time to the people who need them the most. And you realize that, what you do as a lawyer, as a legal function, is important to be able to get to that place, to get to achieve those goals. And so that's my sense of purpose. When I find that meaning, it actually gives me even more inspiration to wake up every single day and do what I do, and even go beyond what I'm doing.
Last question. If there is one advice you would like to give our young girls and even, striving women lawyers out there who want to become like you, what would that advice be?
Have courage and be kind. I know it sounds cliche and I know it's from a movie, but it's still the best and most practical piece of advice that I could give. Have courage. We all know that to be able to challenge status quo, to be able to get out of our comfort zone, that takes courage. To be able to prove to others that you can do the work that's typically perceived to be a man's role, the journey to get there, that takes so much courage. In my case, to be able to uproot myself and the rest of my family from a comfortable life back home and move to a completely foreign land, learn a different culture, learn a new language, that alone, takes so much courage, not just from myself, but from the rest of my family as well. So you have to believe in yourself. I had to believe in myself that I had that courage, because that was the inspiration that the rest of my family also needed to be able to face the new adventures that they have in their lives. One perfect example is also, when we moved from Germany to Switzerland. My son, my eldest son, decided to stay behind in Munich because he was going to start university there. And so he was going to live alone, go to university, while the rest of us are actually, moving to Switzerland. And I asked him, are you going to be okay? Are you not scared? And he said, of course I'm scared, Mom. But you gave me a good example. You were my perfect example, actually, of really having that courage to face a new adventure, to take on a new journey, and to actually enjoy the ride, and really enjoy all the new experiences and all the learnings that I could get from this experience. And so that to me was very powerful, to be able to inspire my own child to actually have that courage to take on new adventures. Now, being kind. One thing about being a global citizen, one thing I learned is that wherever in the world you may be, everyone you interact with is simply a human being, just like yourself. Almost every single human being, wherever in the world they may be, just like you and me, will respond positively to an act of kindness. That's something that you just have to remember always. In my role, I have had the opportunity, of course, pre-pandemic, to travel to many different places. In my role, because our team is looking after corporate strategy, corporate affairs, and global health. One of our biggest mandates is actually to make sure that we are able to transform the lives of people in the most underserved populations, in the most underserved communities around the world. So this took us on a journey from Asia to Latin America to Africa, remote places, last mile places. And it's really a very powerful experience as well. But here is where I also learned the power of kindness. These are different people, these are different cultures. But even if we don't speak the same language, we understood each other in all of these interactions by one single language, and that's the language of kindness. And to me, that is something that, one of the best things that I have learned in this role that I have, in the function that I have, and in this journey that I am taking.
Thank you very much, Attorney Monina Vierneza. Truly an inspiring story. We hope that you will continue to transform lives by your courage and acts of kindness. The Philippines, Germany, Basel, Switzerland. What's next for Attorney Monina Vierneza? Thank you very much for having us today.
To excel and unveil gender and racial biases require a clear vision of your goals, hard work, focus, right mindset, and work ethic, whether you're a man or a woman. Gender doesn't change all these. To the working moms out there constantly trying to strike a balance between career and family responsibilities, know that it is possible to be successful in both, as shared by our guests. The values you hold dear will guide you as you begin to determine what you want to achieve in your chosen career and family life. Once the decision is made, your journey begins. One that will require you to harness God's graces, believe in your self-worth and abilities in order to focus and direct your energies toward fulfilling your dreams and aspirations. It would be great if you can have the support of a mentor who will inspire and motivate you along the way. Who knows, as you travel the path towards your goals, you might become the first Filipina to excel in your chosen field. On behalf of Soroptimist International of Caloocan City, thank you for joining us in this episode, Filipina Firsts. We hope we have inspired you to dream and pursue that dream through an empowered journey for yourself and for the service of others. God bless us all, and maraming salamat muli.
And that's Filipina First for you. We hope you have learned something from these inspired women's stories of their journey to unmask gender and racial biases. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next month on May 29 for another day of inspiration and empowerment. Stay tuned. We'll keep you posted. Stay inspired. God bless.